What's up, everybody? This is Josh Lyles over at Sales-CRM. I'm here with Tyson Lawrence. He's the main operator over at Diablo Freight Ventures. Tyson, how are you doing today?
Great, Josh. Thanks for having on. It's a pleasure to have some time to chat with you.
Of course, man. Grateful to have you with us. I think this will be great for our audience too. They typically will come to our channel for sales content, education, trying to figure out like, hey, how do I get shippers? How do I grow my business? And so I think with you doing this as a consultant, as a coach in the freight brokerage space, and with your background, this will be a really good episode for a lot of people. Really quick, what's the 30 to 60-second elevator pitch for you and what you guys do at Diablo?
So basically, Diablo is kind of a culmination of my career at this point. I've been in the business 25 years, and I've kind of accumulated a few different aspects that I work in the industry. And so one of the big things we do is we do coaching and consulting, or I do coaching and consulting. Diablo also owns a Unishippers franchise that kind of operates as a way for me to coach somebody to run a franchise and use some different techniques along there that I turn use in my coaching and consulting. And then finally, I have some investments in the space. Some of the technology that's out there. Been around for 25 years, seen it from no tech to a lot of tech, and I kind of like to see what's coming out of good brains like yours.
Love it. And you said 25 years in the game. Yep. C.H. Robinson, just one quick question on them, right? Because they're the top player in the space. Yeah. From your experience and being able to work there, what would you say makes C.H. Robinson the top brokerage, or has helped them get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, they had a really big head start. They were when I was working for them, they were pretty much one of the only players in the game. This was like 2000, 2001. There was a few others, but they had a lot of technology and things like that. But it really allowed me to see things on a larger scale, see what the best of the best are working with and their mindsets. And that's continued. I think there's a focus in C.H. Robinson around advancing technology, and they're always going to be trying to do that. And so I'm interested to see what they do with AI coming in, being one of the first people to adapt to that. But yeah, it really gave me an opportunity to see the industry and learn in an environment that was so large that you kind of know, all right, that's what the big boys are doing. What can we do to kind of keep pace with them? And it's closed the gap a lot in recent years with the availability of technology. But yeah, they're just really, they're one of the biggest ones out there. So they're kind of able to take bets on things before others are. And that's what I see them doing with AI right now.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage. And I mean, especially, early 2000s going into the early 2001, 2002. I'm sure a lot of people are still pen and paper, faxing a ton of things. And, if you're able to get any kind of advantage with computer systems, and I know a lot of the software and everything was on premise and everything at that point, but still a big advantage compared to having to, have all that stuff down, pen and paper, and, actually having a computer writing some stuff for you. So.
Well, and there wasn't a lot. So I started my first freight brokerage in 2006, and there was like Mercury Gate and something else, which were prohibitively expensive for a small broker to start out with, right? So, I developed my own. We had a web-based platform that we used internally. Towards the end of 2010, we started doing that. But there, you had to use I worked at a large or medium-sized brokerage, and it was all Excel. I mean, I used Excel when I first started my business, which is crazy to think about now.
It's still really popular today.
Yeah, well, hey, it's fundamental, man, I tell you. But so it's been fun, seeing all the stuff come into play, and kind of you can tell who the real players are that are making some of this stuff, because there's a real difference between people that are coming into the industry and trying to understand it and then create something, rather than people who are in the industry creating something. And I think that's what you saw with Convoy and Uber and things like that, is they came in and they saw an inefficient business and they tried to create a platform before they created a freight brokerage. And the real winners were the ones that already had a freight brokerage and then just, were able to bring on the technology. And that's essentially what you kind of need to do, is just, pad your freight brokerage, your traditional freight brokerage, with as much, technology as you feel like you need.
Got it. No, understood. So you built your own brokerage, got acquired, correct? And now pretty much with what you're doing today, as a consultant and whatnot, basically working with other brokerages and people that are getting started to do the same, correct?
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I realized when so after I sold my second brokerage my first one actually to all, full transparency, went bankrupt after 10 years. So I learned a lot about what not to do the first time around as an independent broker. And I started my second one as an agent with GlobalTranz, and out of the ashes of that, and built it up for about 5 or 6 years, working with small to medium sized companies, kind of taking a consultant approach with them, helping them move their first shipments as a business. And that's what I sold to GlobalTranz. And once I did that, I was in corporate for 2 years, and I was able to kind of help other agents in the network at GlobalTranz and see their businesses. And I just realized that there's a need for, and I also liked it too, is the ability to reach out to others and confirm some of the same issues you're having that other people are having. How do they handle it? Validate some of your moves, some of your thoughts.
Yeah.
It's really important to get out of a silo, and it's really easy to work in a silo, in this business. And I did that for a very long time, and it wasn't very efficient. So now with the, shows like this and other people that have kind of been through the business, there's more resources out there to kind of reach out and say, hey, I'm stuck here. I'm stuck at 10 million. I can't get it any higher. Help me out. What did you do? Or I'm getting started, and what's the best route to go? Do I become an independent agent, or to become or an independent broker, or an agent? And I help people kind of sift through those decisions early on. So you're building a good company, strong foundationally, that in the future you could possibly sell, or changing it around your company to make it more appealing to sell, in the future.
Got it. Yeah, I'm definitely curious to dive into a little bit of that, right? Just kind of the
Yeah,
starting scaling of it. Definitely want to talk some sales with you in this episode here.
you bet.
Just in general, talking about those two, are the majority of your clients, would you say, starting from scratch almost from day one, or have most of them kind of been established and stuck at a certain revenue spot, or would you say it's a good balance of both?
It's kind of a good balance of both. I kind of got them coming from both angles. I honestly believe there is a kind of when you get to about 10, 12, 15 million, there's some things as an independent broker you need to do to be able to take you to the next level. And there's some things as an agent, you can do to help get through that path. But it's really kind of whatever that area, there's some stalling out that happens. And, I think it's around procedures and policies and protocols and sales processes and things like that. Sometimes you can not luck, but you don't really have a process that got you to those 10 or 15 million. You maybe got a big customer that grew up on you, and now you're there and you're like, I'm a big boy company, but I'm not getting beyond that. How do I do that? So we'll dive into the strategy and the details of what could bog you down there. And then the new people, like, I've got guys that have been with Robinson for 20, 25 years, CH Robinson, that are getting out, and now wanting to do something on their own. And when you come out of a big organization like that, it's a little bit intimidating to understand, like, how how do you start a business, right?
Oh yeah.
And like, what's the best way to go? So I consult with them. And then there's people that are just coming into the business for the first time, and I try to dispel a lot of those rumors about, brokers making a ton of money and this is somehow like an easy job, because especially when you're starting out, it takes a while to really get your feet under you, and you got to be able to get through that 6, 9, 12-month period of basically just seeing everything, going through the seasonalities and stuff. So, yeah, I like to work with all levels. I love a challenge. There's a lot of things that I've seen a lot of things. Let me just put it that way. That it's kind of interesting to be like, when I do see it or hear it, it reminds me of when I was going through it, right? And it
Yeah.
kind of just helps me connect with that person and know that, like, how they're feeling.
And I know from Sales Dash's perspective, we've had people, whether it's from Robinson or NTG or TQL,
Mm-hmm.
basically all the large brokerages, right? A lot of those guys eventually will spin off to go do
Yep,
their own thing. They've got the skills, they've got the talent to be able to do it. But
you bet.
it is really interesting because when you talk to them, especially about their first year, they may have not managed as many things with back office and
Mm-hmm.
credit or insurance. And so I feel like it's just a number of different factors where for them, a lot of them were just really good salespeople.
Yeah,
And then now they're having to just get exposed to all the other things that probably just aren't as fun
yeah,
for most people to be able to do. So it is really interesting to kind of hear that. A lot of the times you don't have that those top brokerages, they'll have their own proprietary tech, and then you got to go and you got to start. You're going to typically start with spreadsheets, and then little by little, of course, get a TMS and some of the other systems. But it's really always interesting, I would say, from our seat to kind of just see how people go and
Right.
how those things develop. I was kind of curious because you brought up agency a couple times, and one of the questions I had that I was interested in was just even the process of getting your MC.
Mhm.
So the last brokerage that I worked for, they actually ended up buying a used MC.
Mhm.
And then there's some people that I see that may advise that in terms of the credit situation to do something like that versus just basically applying and getting one
Right.
brand new. Is that something that you have to have discussions about for those that are more so just starting from scratch, or do you recommend the agency route? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, that process, it's interesting because that kind of has been happening for a long time, but not really as prevalent of buying MCs and stuff like that. But since this carrier fraud situations happened and, maturing MCs has become a bigger issue of screening brokers and carriers and things like that, I see it happening more. My first thing is I ask, why do you want to get your own MC? What do you want to do independently, that you can't find in an agent model? And a lot of times it's just them not being aware of what the agent model really entails. I think there's a lot of falsehoods around agent models. Not to bash Landstar. Landstar was kind of the first like real big agent model in the industry, and they kind of didn't get a good reputation, and so everybody kind of thinks Landstar when they hear agents. But now there's so many good agencies out there that are doing things the right way and can provide an environment for new brokers and people who want to start their own business to you succeed, and excel in that environment and have their own business. The independent model, I think, is going, away for a lot of the smaller mom and pop boutique type businesses, unless they have an idea of wanting to, or the backing to grow it to $1 billion or hundreds of millions of dollars. Because as an independent, you're hitting certain levels, and when you hit, certain, like I was talking about 10, 15 million, 25, 50 million, there's capital requirements that come along with that. And that's a whole nother ballgame that you're going to need to do. You can only bootstrap business so big, and then you got to start bringing in other sources of capital to be able to take it to the next level. So if you're wanting to do that and you're able to do that, I suggest going that route. But if you're just wanting to build a good business that gives you what I call freight freedom or freedom in freight, where you're booking business and you have the freedom to run your own business and make and call the shots and just use somebody else's platform where they have the back office, they have all the blanket rates in place with LTL carriers. They may even have a booking, aspect where they can book your LTL and you can just focus on sales. Then I think the agent model is a lot better. And also it goes back to what you were talking about before, where these guys come out of these larger organizations and they got to wear all these different hats. Sometimes they're really good sales guys, and that's what they want to focus on. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be worrying about collecting and, billing and, all these other things. And that's where an agency really kind of comes in. They're able to, handle all that stuff for you. So you focus on what you're good at. If you're in an independent model, you're going to have to hire that stuff out if you're not going to do it yourself. And that's a whole nother thing, because most people aren't managers or good at sales. They don't know exactly what they're looking for in that person to put them in there. So again, all the back office and all the hard parts and the hats that you're not familiar with can get worn by somebody else, and then you wear the hat that you're the best at. And sometimes, it just takes in having a conversation to point that out to people that, the independent model is not always the best way to go. It just really, it limits your ability to kind of scale quickly. And I think agencies, you can scale a lot quicker. And final note on that is, I think it's easier to sell a business within an agency than it is to be an independent agent or independent broker and trying to sell to somebody else. And I say that because a lot of these relationships are very tenuous. And if they're outside of an organization, bringing them inside a new organization sometimes don't always transfer. And these organizations aren't, that's a risk they're taking when they're buying your business. So you've got to have a really solid, diverse business where when you're an agent model, they're already familiar with your customers. They're usually already billing them and communicating with them. And so when a transaction goes down, it's a lot more smooth.
Got it. I am kind of curious because I don't I I guess with now having so many friends in the agency space and also some agents that use Sales Dash, but I come from I come from the independent model
Mhm.
where it was fully bootstrapped, and by the end of year 3 we were at around probably 45, 46 million
Mhm.
in revenue with pretty healthy profits too, because it was more niche freight, a lot of
Mhm.
basically almost all open deck specialized sort of moves and stuff. Um, yeah, that part I always find really interesting because with some of the stuff that I've seen with some agents, and like there's one out publicly right now kind of, has filed a lawsuit against, or at
Mhm.
least a RICO lawsuit against a really large agency, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You dropped them earlier, but um, I've always wondered that with the dynamic of them technically having the ownership of your agency and those customers, and if they can do anything, legally, obviously, because you're under their ownership and whatnot, versus if you were obviously independent, it's totally separate. We don't have to get into the crazy nuances of that, but that's always been one of the things where I feel like I've always thought being independent would help you out in that regard versus the agency route, because obviously, there's still kind of another, there's a whole umbrella, I guess,
Mhm.
that's underneath it, unless I'm
Yeah, yeah.
off
So
base there.
that's an interesting thing, and I love to answer this question because it really hits to the point where you got to find the right agency. You got to read your contract. You got to be understand what you're going into. But the good agencies, they want you to run your own business. They don't want to mess around with, like, you know, your customers and things like that. And so I just advise if you're going into an agent contract, you do make sure that you protect yourself.
Yeah,
You
just look
just
at the
don't.
contract.
Yeah, and don't sign willy nilly. We're seeing a rise in agencies right now come up because I think a lot of agencies, brokers are really getting to that point where they're like, okay, we're at 50 million. How can we grow faster, but we have limited resources and whatnot and less risk? They'll split off and do an agency. So they'll have an internal department, and then they'll have an agency department. And they're kind of like diversifying their business a bit, one or the other. And then you
Hmm.
can, those agencies then are buying other agents and throwing them over to their direct side to kind of keep up with the growth. And that's the model I think that is the best to look for. Um, but with that being said, there are some agencies that will take advantage of you if you're not willing early on, especially aware. So that I think that's important to, interview agents, know the questions you want to ask. I currently offer a kind of a beginner's freight broker class, and one of the first things we talk about is, the questions to ask when you're finished with this class, you kind of have an understanding of how the freight business works. Then go interview your customers. Go interview agents. Then you kind of know what you're looking for and what to
Yeah.
look out for, as opposed to doing it the other way around. And so, yeah, I do a lot of that kind of matchmaking. I have a handful of agencies that I work with to find the right agents to send them. A lot of people reach out to me to kind of help me place them because I have a lot of relationships there. But yeah, just speaking on that, that lawsuit that's currently out there, I just really think that there are ways that you can try to figure out how to word this rightly, but basically, you got to be aware of everything that's going on and also be accountable to what you're putting yourself into, and also know that you can get terminated from these agencies for bad behavior or things like that. And so that is a possibility. It isn't always they're there to steal your clients, but you can't come in and run a roughshod through a business, as well. So I just I'm kind of one of those people that I'm accountable for the type of business I want to run. I want to make sure that I'm with somebody who's accountable for the type of business they want to run, and then just try to ask
Hmm.
the right questions. But I don't think it's as big a problem out there as most people fear of big agencies stealing clients, because they've got their own. They're not really interested in it. If they're really that interested in it, they'll buy you. You know what I mean? If they really want your clients that bad, they'll buy you because they don't want to go through this shit.
That's
But
fair.
you know, um, but again, I'm not speaking for all. Some are shady, right? And that's just kind of where a little due diligence kind of helps.
Yeah, I think the due diligence is crucial because I even feel like from being a hiring manager when I was in brokerage, and whether it was sales or ops, I feel like the questions that people ask are so important, right? Just as
Yeah.
much as of it is as an interview for us trying to hire the
Right.
broker, it should be the same, right? You should be interviewing us to really make sure that we're a good fit. And I feel like that can easily be missed from people. And again, I'm not in the agency world, but I would assume if somebody saw 70-30% commission splits, they're tired of micromanagement, all that stuff. It's going to be
Yeah.
appealing for them to just be like, cool, let's sign and let's get this thing rolling. If I've got some customers that are ready to go and
Right.
my non-compete situation. So yeah, it's, there's definitely a lot of things that seem obviously very appealing, but I fully align with you on that, where I think knowing what question, like the questions to ask. And so I think that's a really good thing if that's something that you're consulting and helping out with, because sometimes people just don't know what questions
Well,
to
they
ask.
don't know what to ask, right? They don't know what's going to come down the pike, Adam. They're kind of coming into it. And, a lot of, and it's just really, I look at it, I kind of call it matchmaking, really, because personalities are big. Culture and personalities are huge in this industry, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, I found out that's why C.H. Robinson hired me. They put me through a personality test. I didn't even realize it. I was dumb out of college, and I just was, I was just filling stuff out, applying for jobs. It was around the dot-com boom, where, all these tech jobs were popping up, and I was applying for handfuls of them at the time. And they called me back and were really insistent in doing, I turned it down numerous times, and then they offered to move me to California, and I started listening. And but when I got here, everybody in our office was the same age from all different parts of the country, and we all got along and had a great culture. And ultimately, it dawned on me the reason why was because they had this personality test. They knew the type of personality they were looking for. So I think that's kind of important when you're looking at an agency you want to go to. What's their culture like? What do they do? And sometimes those are hard questions to get from somebody who is selling you that product, right? Or selling you that agency. Yeah, we got the greatest. We got freight gongs and, all kinds of cool shit. And you're like, oh, that sounds fun. But in turn, they're being shady. So reaching out to someone like myself who's been in the industry can kind of give you a pulse of what it's like inside those agencies, just either from friends that work there, colleagues that work for, or people that are reaching out to me from those agencies wanting to get out. So I have a few of those, that I kind of avoid people going to. They can offer big splits. They can offer things that are, really, pretty, but, at the end of the day, it just, it could be a bad situation. So yeah, it's always good to kind of know what that culture's like, what your personality is like. How do you want to be involved? Are you somebody who's just a stubborn lone wolf and you want to be left alone? Let's find you a place that, allows you to do that. If you want to be someone more, taking advantage of, other agencies being around and kind of talking and collaborating and not being so closed off, there's some great agencies for that have conferences and things, training programs and monthly meetings and sales contests and stuff like that that mold that together. So yeah, it's just kind of a different breeds out there for sure.
Right. Going back to some stuff that you were talking about a little bit earlier and transitioning to some of the startup, when it comes to the brokerage, working to scale it, grow it, sales stuff. How do you advise people on picking a niche? How do you assist them with even going through that process to start somewhere?
Yeah, that's a real interesting question because it's kind of different for everybody. Sometimes it may be something you're interested in. You have an interest in, I don't know, beer, so you want to reach out to beer companies, things like that. Mainly I give like 4 or 5 areas like manufacturing. I get kind of broad and let people really dive into it if they don't have a particular niche in mind and start allowing themselves to work their way towards one. Sometimes niches pop up because they're first kind of yes you get. I mean, there's been times where we've gotten into niches that we didn't see, but they were a yes that we got, and we're like, oh shit, like
There's a lot more of
there's
these
a
out
whole
here.
bunch of stuff here, and then you start kind of going down that rabbit hole, and you become kind of a, an advisor or somebody that can go to for that industry. You become an expert on that industry. So not only about the transportation, but about their product and how they make money and what they're looking for and where you fit in on the line items of their profitability. Sometimes if you're the number one, line item, they're going to be coming at you all the time trying to hammer rates down. If you're kind of third or fourth, it's more of an efficiency thing. They want to make sure the freight gets there on time. It's not as important. So anyway, you can get deeper and deeper in these niches, but I really, it sounds counterintuitive, but kind of cast a wide net and then just kind of pull it in to places that you kind of find that you're learning a lot about the industry and you see an opportunity to move forward.
From a scalability aspect, do you kind of have a preference between the split model of cradle to grave? Curious your thoughts on that.
Man, this is the age-old question. So I came from the cradle to grave method. I ran 2 businesses that way and really had a hard time separating it. And I really am doing, I don't know, a different Chicago model, or I don't know, it's different models. They call it Cincinnati model or something. But I see the benefits of both, right? And I was able to scale faster in the Chicago model or the separated model. I think you get really bogged down and you can only do so much in the cradle to grave method. So it works well for smaller brokerages or smaller books of business. But when you get to a certain level, you're going to just peter out unless you kind of separate it, because you got to have specialists, in each area once you get to a certain scale. But the key is the communication between those two. That's the linchpin. And it's always been the linchpin. That if you don't have the clear communication between the sales guys and the carrier guys, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So wherever you can, make that connection happen is the key. So I go back and forth on it. I think it's good for certain models, and so I think you can grow out of it in certain times.
Yeah. I think a lot of the companies that we work with, so much of it is contingent upon the leader of the group, where they come from and whatnot. Because I think most people I run into are more cradle to grave people.
Yep.
And it makes sense. I understand it, right? Obviously, you want to get that person to be paying for their seat, and then obviously paying for everybody's bills, revenue, non-revenue, whatever it may be. But I agree with you on the separation piece because of the specialized. And I've never been in a cradle to grave model. I've only been split. But I just constantly hear this from cradle to grave people of it's the issue of once the book grows, I don't have time for prospecting, or let's just be real, not many people are really like cold calling, right? It's just constant rejection. It's not a good feeling for humans just in general. Some people do actually love it. There's a very small number of people that do. But I think like getting somebody to just jump back into the sales hat, you got to kind of warm up dust off the cobwebs and all that kind of stuff. You're out of your flow. I feel like it's definitely a big flow thing there. But yeah, it's always a fun topic to talk about because everybody's got their own methods.
And I think the minds work differently too. I think operational guys, carrier sales guys, they're kind of they kind of can see what they're working on, and kind of one thing leads to the other. The sales kind of see the bigger aspect of things sometimes, and making them connect. I will tell you this. So I did cradle to grave up until I became an agent, and I did not want to turn over our truckload sales at GlobalTranz. Like that was my biggest thing, is like, I know the way we do it. I've developed a system. I worked in produce for a long time. And I kind of took that produce model and applied it to dry freight and everything, where it's just over communicate, be really involved in the details. So I was really hesitant to turn it over to GlobalTranz and have them do it. But I will tell you this, that we scaled faster. I had 10 people working for me when we did 10 million. When I went to the agency model, we did over 25 million with 5. So, I mean, the ability to kind of trim it down, and a lot of that was because everything we were getting, we were throwing over the fence to them, and they were booking it and doing a great job, and we had a lot of truckloads, but it took a while for me to, relinquish that. But if it's control, I mean, to be honest with you, some people just want that control, right?
Yep.
And, you have to be able to tell yourself that, like, hey, look, I could be bigger if I get outside of myself and allow things to happen. I think that happens in, when you're building a business too. And back to what we were talking about before, wearing a lot of different hats. I've learned that the less hats that I can wear, but the more I can oversee the other hats, the better I am. It just frees you up. You're able to see things differently.
So on the topic of different hats,
Mhm.
with all these brokerages that are getting spun up, for the clients that you may be working with, you've got operations, sales, back office. There's a technology aspect. There's more things. Where would you say people typically struggle the most and need more advisement?
Pretty much sales, right? And creating a process. That's one of the challenges that I had when I first got started was, and I didn't understand like a process, like creating and establishing a process. I was kind of like willy nilly, like get a list, make as many calls you had, tell them what we can do, try to get them signed up, da da da. I mean, you had kind of a process, but it was more scattershot. When you're able to kind of say, okay, hey, this is how I'm going to handle this call. We're going to move into this phase, and then we're going to move into this phase, and then hopefully close here. It seems to run a lot easier, not easier, a lot more efficiently. That way, you're not losing things in the gap because a lot of it's follow up, right? Follow up's the big thing that most people don't do. And you can get just a little nugget of something and not follow up on it. But if you get that little nugget and follow up on it, it could turn into a lot. So I harp on the following up, but more so kind of creating a process. And that's one of the things that, one of the sales classes I have was I've created a process now. Again, at Tyson at 46 is a lot different than Tyson at 26 years old. At 26, I threw a lot of shit against the wall to see what would stick. And now at 46, I'm understanding, oh, this is why people in businesses have processes. And this is why, these big companies have processes. And not because they want to be overlord, big corporate. It's because they got to get everybody going in one direction. And you got to get yourself going in one direction when you narrow it down. And in sales, I think that's really important. Being organized and being consistent. And that's what we try to establish.
Do you have any typical recommendation for brokers that are reaching out to shippers to say, hey, I've reached out X amount of times. This is when I should move on?
That's always a touchy one, right? Because it's like, if you're after you make contact, I'm always kind of like make contact with you somehow, right? Like at least give me a no or a middle finger or something, and then I can move
Something.
on. But that's hard sometimes. You just keep getting rejected, or nobody responds, or especially nowadays when you're sending emails, that can get kind of frustrating. But I would just say, be consistent. Give them a couple, 2 or 3 times to get them on the phone. If you get them on the phone and then they're giving you the runaround, not willing to commit, like maybe 2 calls, I would, put them on the nurture sequence of following up with them over time, maybe once or twice a month just to keep your name in there, but move on, use that energy somewhere else, so you can kind of keep the ball rolling. But yeah, there's no real like 3 calls, that's it. Because sometimes there's legitimate reasons why they didn't answer the first 2, and you can get in your head and tell yourself reasons why they didn't answer, or they're avoiding me or they're not. And then you get them on the 3rd call and they're like, yeah, I'd love to do it. And you're like, oh man, I was just about ready to give up on this. So I just kind of, it's a real internal thing that you just got to kind of follow up. But making 6, 7, 8, 9 phone calls to a place and they're still shining you, that's just wasted effort.
Is there anything that you typically advise when it comes to the size shipper between small shipper, mid-size, enterprise level shipper for these guys? Because I'm sure a lot of them can want to focus on whale hunting, going
Oh
after
yeah,
just the absolute largest ones. Anything there?
yeah. So I suggest working with small to medium sized customers, because the large ones, they've got so many hitting them up already. And what can you really bring to the table to you know, help them help their business, right? And if you're at a smaller brokerage, you're not at a CH Robinson or some of these other bigger ones. It's not really worth your time. Plus, they're going to be controlling your business. They're going to tell you how to run it. Where if you work with some of these smaller companies, you can help them understand why they should run it the way you want to run it. You have more touch. A lot of times you're talking to the CEO, or the owner or whatever. So you're able to really kind of get into their fabric of their company. That's what we try to do, is we try to build a relationship early on with them. So when they are getting hammered by a bunch of different, brokers, they understand that they've got a good one and they don't want to let it go. So yeah, I suggest starting out with small to medium sized brokers or customers, trying to offer them some kind of a way of understanding how you can do it better for them, consulting. and then have as many, modes in your switchblade or in your blade or your switch knife as possible. Because if you're going in there only for truckload, they've probably been called by 40 different truckload carriers already, and it's like, you got to be able to find a way to stand out.
Mhm.
And, dressing up in a costume and shit like that's not standing out. That's what I'm talking about. And so I go the other route where, okay, let's try, maybe they need LTL help, but I have LTL. So if I have 4 or 5 different modes in my portfolio that I can use for them, I try one of those other modes, and maybe they need help there. And then when you get in that way, you can work your way up to the truckload. But I want to go at a customer with as many options as possible, and usually that can come from being part of an agency. You don't have to be an expert in white glove, but then get a white glove, opportunity. You pull back, call somebody in your agency that handles white glove. They'll jump on the call with you or brief you on it, and you're able to now, help that customer. And they're going to much appreciate that, as opposed to you trying to sell them something that they
Just
already
BS
got
your way
running.
through.
Right. And then they're
Yep.
going to give you shit through the back door that way. They're going to be like, hey, I got this last minute, full truckload that just came up. I know you do full truckload. Can you help me out? And then you become the hero, right? And then they all of a sudden you start seeing more truckload stuff. So I just recommending finding other ways to get in the door, as opposed to just trying to barge your way through the front door with everybody else.
Makes sense. Let's say that I came to you, I was stalled out at 10 million in revenue, work with you, and you help me double and get to 20 million in revenue. And maybe now I'm ready to look at the acquisition process.
Mm-hmm.
What's a common misconception you see that brokerages have or brokerage owners have when it comes to the acquisition process?
Well, maybe sometimes the multiples that are out there, as far as what they think their business is worth. That's one of the biggest things. It's common knowledge that you could probably, and I was around this, about 3, a multiple of 3 on your gross profit is usually what they're looking at. Now, and that's kind of in an agent model type of situation. Now, if you're an independent model, those numbers can be maybe larger, but then you're bringing something to the table that they don't have. It's a software, it's a proprietary system that they created, that broker created or whatever. And then you say get like 6, 7, 8% or EBITDA, you got to give 2 or 3 to a business broker or somebody to negotiate the deal for you. So you're back into 5, somewhere around there, 5, 4. So it's about 3 to 5 is where that range is, more lower end if you're in the agent model, but it's a cleaner deal and you're able to kind of transition out a little faster. But yeah, and then getting to the point of understanding that you have a diversified business. No company wants to buy a business that is fully reliant on one customer. If you go in there and you're 90% with one customer, they're not going to touch you. They want to see a fully developed business that know that they lose one or 2 of these customers in the sale process transferring over, it's not going to submarine the whole deal. And then another thing is just really making sure you have a culture, or your teammates, the people you're selling. If you have a team, make sure they're employable, right? Because you can get them really good jobs inside a bigger organization, but if they're a freaking mess and they've just been hanging around for a while, they're going to be a weigh on you when you go over to the new side. So that was one of the things that I made sure of, is that I was selling not only my book of business, but I was selling my team and my culture. And I was giving them an opportunity to now jump from working in a small to medium-sized industry or brokerage to now being a larger organization. And some of them like that better, working in not all people are cut out to be entrepreneurs or working in startups. That's very stressful. You could be out of a job in a day. So some people like the, comfort of knowing they're working for a larger organization. And so sometimes you can give that to your employees if they're a little like, especially working with someone like me who's already gone bankrupt once.
That's so funny. Yeah, I feel like of course, the whole idea and concept of entrepreneurship, shoot, even sometimes management, right? Sounds great, but I always, especially when people would always want to become managers, I'd always just start talking with them about stress management, right? Like, how do you handle your own stress and your own problems? Because when you become a manager, if you're managing a team of 4, 6, 8, 16 people, Well, now all of their stress and pressures become your top priority. Plus, you have to manage your own, especially if you're a middle manager or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And truth is, just most people aren't cut out for it. It's just a whole different thing, and a lot of times you get paid less. So
You bet.
sometimes it's not as sexy as what I think a lot of people shoot it out to be. I definitely thought it was interesting your take on culture, because I feel like when I watch the acquisitions from afar, and obviously I'm not in it, I just see the stuff on social and then I see the churn.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly, it's where you could tell in these acquisition processes, it feels like a lot of times the cultures don't exactly mesh, because you'll see a lot of the turnover of the people that end up, hey, just took on a new position at this company now. And I
Right.
feel like that's very common, or, obviously having friends that could be on both sides. Sometimes you hear about it and it's just this one's trying to dominate over the other one. And it could be a really interesting dynamic. So I've always found that kind of interesting to watch when you see these mergers and acquisitions happen.
Yeah, I
The
really got to see
customer,
it first. I'm sorry, to cut you off then, but
yeah,
I agree. I got to see it really close up with GlobalTranz and Worldwide Express.
Worldwide Express, yeah.
Yeah, so no joke, we closed on my deal on a Tuesday, and um, the CEO for GlobalTranz, Bob Farrell, called me on a Thursday night, and there was some pressure to kind of get my deal done. We were dragging out a little bit, and Bob told me, like, Tyson, we need to get this done, because if it doesn't get done, it's not going to happen for a while. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, are they
He
just trying
probably
to
just
get
couldn't tell you.
right? And so on a Thursday, he calls me and he says, "Hey, just want to give you a heads up. I know I was telling you we need to get this deal done, but we are merging with Worldwide Express, and we're announcing it tomorrow." I mean, literally 4 days after I sold my business. And so I was like, whoa, okay. Well, at that time, I was like, whatever, I got my money, but I
Perfect
had,
timing.
right, yeah. But I had 2 years still left in kind of an earn-out situation, and they had me in agent development. And so being behind the scenes and watching $2 billion companies come together was very interesting, and seeing how that played out, and there's a lot of overlap in positions. There's definitely two different types of culture, but in this case, I think GlobalTranz was kind of they've been very around like 2010, 2011, and they've gone through this growth process, right? And they kind of have grown up along the way, from the founder stages to the, when private equity got in and whatnot. And Wex was already there, right? And so they kind of have come, I could see them coming in and taking over, making it more of a corporate culture, a more of a $2 billion culture, right? Like when you have a business, $4 billion culture, when you have a business that big, there's just certain things that need to be in place, right? And so you're right. Yeah, some people leave, some people get promoted. There turns into kind of a Lord of the Flies situation where people are trying to go after some of the same positions,
Yeah.
So, it's very interesting to watch. But yeah, when two cultures collide, it can make it for a difficult process. They've got it worked out. They're still working through things, but it was nuts just to see it all kind of really clash together.
It sounds nuts. I mean, you got to merge
Yeah.
technology. You got some customer overlap. I feel like
Right.
if you're too large, especially those two players, man,
Yeah.
there's easily going to be customer overlap. So, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, what was really interesting that I guess I didn't fully think about though was the customer diversity. You saying, hey, if one
Right.
of your customers is 90%, because I feel like it's just kind of the golden rule anyway, right? Where a
Yeah.
lot of your customers, the majority of them run 80%, but it's sometimes the same with salespeople,
Yeah.
where the really small percentage of your salespeople do 80% plus of your revenue and profit. So
Right.
that piece I think is really important if you're really considering getting acquired and making sure, hey, are you
Yep.
attractive on paper? And I'm sure there's lists more, more bulleted things that
Oh,
people can
sure.
do to, position themselves. But that was one that I thought really was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think very important. It's really underrated. Now, I mean, I was bitten by the diversity bug or lack of diversity bug, and now everything I do is diversified. From obviously like even Diablo Freight Ventures is diversified. We're doing three different
Hmm.
things, but each one of those things we're diversified in, So we're not. It's a hard thing to go to sleep at night knowing you got 10 people working for you and you're doing $10 million in business, and tomorrow you could get into a dispute and it could go away. And that's
Yeah.
essentially what happened, and I saw it come, and I was frantically trying to diversify, but, I had a problem too, just to get a little more into it is, I had one big client that had a lot of different aspects of their business inside of it. So we were growing like a weed inside that business. Like, we had we were in all these different, divisions, from floral to produce to beverages to, so I was like, I'm diversified. Not really, it was like, because something happens over here, it takes it all down. And that's essentially what happened, And so now I think it's really, and it's another problem too, is you can have a company, especially if you start out with small to medium sized businesses that could take off, and just grow.
Mhm.
And so in our second business, we had that situation where we were being very diligent about being diversified. And then one of our clients just took off. I mean, they just blew up, and you're like, trying to frantically backfill on it, but also enjoying, hey, wow, this is great. But, the thing I say, how cute this is, but it's like, would you kick a supermodel out of bed for eating crackers, right? Like, I'm not going to fire them because they're growing too big, You just got to make sure that you're aware of it and you're trying to kind of fill in behind and never take your foot off the pedal. Always keep trying to acquire customers. And I've seen one too many, and it's natural. It's human nature. It's, in fact, I saw Nick Saban talk about this, a former football coach at Alabama.
The
Complacency is
goat.
the poison. Complacency is the poison. And this guy knows more than ever. He had two teams that went back-to-back 19-game winning streaks with championships in the middle. And he was always harder on them after they won than when they lost. Because when they lost, they felt like shit already. He didn't need to, make it worse. But when they won, they got complacent. And complacency breeds ineffectiveness and sloppiness and all that type of stuff. And when you're with a customer doing that, you can get complacent, and something happens, and you're out the door. So you've always got to keep adding customers, and enjoy the ride, with that one, but also know that you got to backfill. Keep yourself. And then when you're more attractive, when you go to sell, they're not going to want to buy a business that's 75, 85, 95% one customer. They want a business. They want a well-rounded business that know if they lose their third or fourth best customer, or even their first best customer within the transition, that's not going to be all worthless. So
Right.
that's a great way to, keep in mind when you're building your business.
Speaking my language, man. Right on.
Love it.
Well, for the sake of time, last question for you, just out of respect for time.
Yeah.
Just from, I guess, just even, the starting spot of, okay, hey, I'm looking to get acquired, to the time where that actually may happen.
Mhm.
What's sort of the broad range timing expectation that you would say people should probably have of how long that process can take?
About a year. We started talking when GlobalTranz acquired me. We started talking in January, and we closed it in June. But we had started the process probably a year earlier, and we weren't ready. As a business, we weren't ready. We weren't attractive. I mean, we were, not that we weren't attractive, but we just, again, we needed to do some diversification a little bit more. We just needed to tie up some loose ends. So the less loose ends you need to do will quicken the deal. And that all reverts back to the foundation you lay early on. If you kind of lay the foundation early on and start doing some things ahead of time, that when you get to that stage, they're already done, and you don't kind of go back and re-implement them, like financial things, or processes and procedures. There's just a whole bunch of different things that, you can take away to get better, as a business, that you need to look at. And, it's another thing I can help look at too. If people are, wanting to make their business more resilient, I can help point out some areas in which you can, you may not notice, or even just talk through some of this stuff. Because again, like we were talking about earlier, when you're a business owner and shit's coming at you a million different ways, and you're making sales and you're having some success, it's hard to really slow things down. It's just human nature. Just like, I've been grinding, I've been making 1,000 phone calls, and I finally hit pay dirt. I'm going to enjoy this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, enjoy it, but let's just, make sure you take a step back and understand that you don't get blinded by the light, so to speak.
It's great stuff, man. Well, this has been awesome. I think with everything that we've got a chance to talk about, agency, the whole process of getting started from the first place, considering agency versus the independent route, split model, cradle to grave, sales, acquisition, and stuff. I think for anybody that listens all the way through, they'll get a lot of value out of it. Just for anybody that does want to get in touch with you online, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Go to my website, or go to our website, diablofreight.com. I'm on LinkedIn too. I'm more active on LinkedIn than anywhere else. So either one of those places, you'll get my email, you shoot it, or go there and schedule some time. There's my calendar's up on there, and we can take a 15, 20-minute call and just kind of see where you're at. But yeah, I love. This is where I'm at in my career now. I'm at the coach stage. I was a player. I was a player coach, and now I'm kind of in the coach GM stage of everything. And I'm enjoying it, and I love the different problems and questions that come my way. It makes my brain think, and kind of use some of this what I thought was useless knowledge to help other people out in the industry.
No,
It's
it's
a cool,
great. I mean,
it's a great industry, man.
yeah, and I mean it's the end goal for a lot of people, right? Of course, you want to build, grow, get started and stuff, but at a certain time, like there's always a goal that people have of, hey, do they want it to be a lifestyle business? Do they want
Right.
to, get the big payday and stuff? So I think being able to actually talk to somebody that's been there, done that, does it for a living, can give you the pointers and just steer you in the right direction.
Yeah.
I feel like is a no-brainer to have that advisor.
Yeah, I wish I would have had it, and that's part of why I got into it. Was that I come from a line of coaching and mentors. That's how I learn, and so to finally recognize them at that point, I wish I kind of would have had it more specific around the industry. I got it more on a business perspective because I didn't really know how to run a business to begin with, but really intimately knowing how this industry works. There's
It's
not a lot
different,
of people out there. It's totally different. So
totally
yeah,
different.
yeah. It's a fun, like I said, we'll, there's a lot of good stories and stuff that, I love to tell because they were just so dumb, you don't know until you get through it. So yeah, I reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Good deal. Well, Tyson, this is like our third, fourth conversation, but it's fun every time, man. So I really appreciate you taking the time to give some content to the audience, drop some knowledge and whatnot. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime next year, after we've had some more mutual customers working together and
Yeah.
seeing what the next year entails. So I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Always. Cheers.
Cheers.